is a recap that the beast from the sea is inspired by the red dragon, which are the empires in the past that have persecuted and ruled over Israel, or the faith. And then the seventh head of the red dragon is the beast from the earth, which has 7 heads, sea. And the beast from the sea is like a federal empire that has underneath it, the cultures and certain aspects where the populations are, triaged to that make like a kingdom. And then after the 8th head is like the royal one after that. And so that is, you have the beast from the sea that comes out after the first 6 seals, or the 5 seals. Then you have the 2 witnesses beating the federal, basically. The Antichrist is out, conquering other lands, or putting down rebellions. The false prophet, the religious system inside is persecuting the saints. There seems to be, like a sort of like a rule book that they play from, and AI seems to be involved, recalibrated. And anyway, so the 2 witnesses, the trumpets start happening, and then once they're killed by the angels that come out, they're like the royal, the royal that wind up having the bowls of wrath poured out on them after Revelation 15. And so you have, like in Revelation 18, the dragon, the beast, which now is the angels as the 8th head, and the false prophet speaking with frogs coming out of their mouth, which is symbolic of rebirth, like a new story or whatever. And so that's what's coming. You have the scene, it's happening in Jerusalem, and then you have the rapture following the mid-tribulation rapture happening at the 7th trumpet when the 2 witnesses are raised. Then you have the scene opening up into Revelation 15. And Revelation 15, everybody, including the 144,000 or the martyrs, everybody still alive too, is surrounding the temple. And it talks about a temple in heaven, and there's also a temple on earth because of Revelation 11 describes one. So it's kind of like mirrored. But that would be the rapture, and you could read about it in Revelation 15. Nobody's allowed to go in the temple. There's angels coming up and down like Joseph's ladder with golden sashes, and it says nobody's allowed in the temple until the bowls of wrath are passed out on the beast. And so that's the fallen angels at the time, and that's what we don't have to worry about as far as the tribulation. It's a mid-tribulation. It's not whatever. And so the one thing I wanted to talk about was Isaiah 65:20. And, how could that verse ever be come to pass? Let me just get there real quick. Hang on. So when people are raptured, the dead rise first, but those who are still alive are changed. And then, it says right here, like, there's the second advent, or there's the final judgment when everybody's immortal. But how can you have this verse be accomplished? Where people die at maybe 100, but definitely not. So they live basically the same as, I don't know if you could see that. No, probably not. Whatever. So it says, never again will there be an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who doesn't live out his years. Anyone who dies at 100 will be thought they were cursed. So it's looking back to Genesis 5 before the flood. And when Methuselah is like 969 years old, Noah's like 600 years old. And so that's the change that occurs. And that's the time of the second advent and the millennium, which was never condemned at any council, it says on the internet. But then there were a few crazy people who had weird ideas like communism, even back in the past, why it was looked down on. But it definitely does speak about, we're taking all of this literal, you know what I mean? So that there's a time at the second advent, where people that are alive live to 600 to 900 years old with Christ on earth, and the resurrected martyrs all in one body. And then everybody's living peacefully until the nations decide to rebel when the devil is let out of the bottomless pit, because the beast and the angels are thrown in the lake of fire with the false prophet. Everybody else is in Hades or hell. And so basically that Isaiah 65:20, how could it ever be accomplished without, it can't be accomplished if it just goes to people living immortally. They have to be able to say, oh, if you reached 100 years old, it's like you died an infant. And that's how it's accomplished. So around the second generation of them, Gog and Magog, they rebel. And that just means, the Gog and Magog are symbolic for just, non-believing nations. It has nothing to do with like Russia or anything like that, And then there's a lot that's said that has already been prophesied when it comes to like Damascus, falling or whatever, and Ezekiel 37, this is the resurrection. And so that's what you have. You have the beast, the red dragon is symbolic from the beginning of time. It started out as a serpent that, maybe it was a winged serpent or whatever that they have in Egypt or, other cultures where they talk about it. But it was forced to crawl on its belly, the seraphim, But the serpent was forced to crawl on his belly and eat dust all the days of his life. And Adam was forced to become that dust once he died. Or not Adam, but humanity. And so over time, that snake or whatever, the serpent, was devouring all the dust and became a great red dragon. And it says in Revelation 12 that, its tail took a third of the stars out. And that's the fallen angels in Genesis 6 and Enoch 8 through 10, the Watchers section. Enoch is a library of like 5 books, and it's been messed with over time, but the Watchers section preserves the story that's mentioned, by Paul, by Jude, by Peter, and by John, describing, angels who left their first estate, women wearing a veil or a head covering for to not provoke the angels or whatever. It has to do with the tradition of that. So the tail, while the snake was small, knocked a third of the stars out of heaven. That's Azazel and the rest of them mentioned in Enoch. And, or the Watcher's book. And so, you get the 5 angels in Revelation 9 by going to, Enoch 8. And, you got to isolate how many subjects there are, because there's more than 5 angels mentioned. One will be teaching the motion of the moon. That falls under astronomy. So there are those 4 angels, one of which in the 6th trump, one of them is the one who led everybody from heaven, and was the leader of the stars who fell. And the one who landed, Azazel, is the one who was ascribed all the sin because he taught mining and war. So that's the original story with that. And and then that snake wound up becoming the 7-headed beast. It devours the dust, the empires. It turned into a dragon, and that's the story of it. And then after the after the second advent, there's New Jerusalem 1,000 years later. And so during that time, that millennial time, where people live to be almost 1,000 years old, there's some who don't take the mark that wind up, that are still alive, and that are able to, they're not resurrected, they're changed into, Methuselah and Noah, able to live that long. And then the final resurrection happens, and we join the martyrs who come with Christ for that time, because they're like a separate race, the second death has no power over. And that's a lot of the story, and so that's when you hear about the book of Revelation, if you want to take it literally, it's the first 6 seals is the onset of the beast from the sea, which is the 7th head. The 8th head of the 7-headed beast, which is part of the 7, is the royal fallen angels, and so that is part, I don't know, I kind of lost my train of thought, but it doesn't matter. So Revelation starts with the 4 seals, the onset of this new kingdom, which is an occult kingdom. You can do whatever you want. It's like Babylon was, but you have to worship this guy or whatever. Something new, something new, and then there's a persecution. The 2 witnesses rise. They're like Moses and Aaron. They're doing all the plagues and everything, and then one of their plagues, it seems to the world, backfires on them, and the angels, instead of killing like the angel of death did, the firstborn of Egypt, they kill the 2 witnesses. And then they rise. That's the rapture at the 7th trumpet, mid-tribulation theory. And, then that's the change to Isaiah 65:20 for those alive, the millennial presence on earth. And then, you have the final rebellion after that. And then it's the restoration of Eden, where the physical and the spiritual are one again in creation. And that's all you need to know right now. I think that covers a lot of it. And then we can get into detail on what the mark of the beast is, just real quick. There's another form of gematria called isophatry or something. It's a Greek form of like counting, doing some weird stuff. And so they just take the first letter of the word and say it's like, in the case of 666, you'd be adding 6 plus 6 plus 6 equals 18. The mark of a man could easily mean the mark of Cain, because the 18 numerical word for life is L'chaim, and the Antichrist kingdom could just be like, well, you know what? Everybody who's sanctioned for life, that's the new flag. That's my empire. It's L'chaim, and whoever doesn't have that is not. You don't get to live. And this could be any kingdom. It could be Turkey. It could be Israel. It could be hundreds of years in the future, or it could be even tomorrow. But it's going to be something new, and it's going to be centered around Jerusalem. So, the mark of the beast, at least the way I have it down, is the mark of Cain. And that's the life, the word life. Instead of like a hexagon flag or whatever kind of flag, you know what I mean? Star of Rephaim. I don't want to pick on the Jews too much. But, you know what I mean? It's going to be different. It's going to be the L'chaim symbol. And that's going to be passed out by the beast from the earth, which is, Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, mostly the structure of the Catholic and Orthodox that have apostatized into a new religion. And the thing about the religion is, they have their Lord Maitreya that's going to come, supposedly, but it contradicts, the Hinduist religion, because the Kali Yuga cycle is over in like 432 million years. So what are they going to say? I'm the next age of the Hindu thing. I'm the reincarnated Christ. So it's going to go against the traditional religions, and there's going to be fighting, and that's where the Mahdi comes involved. I use him as an example. In Islam, it says, the Dajjal is going to rewrite the Quran, and the Mahdi is going to stand up against him. And so that's what all the religions are going to do. Not all of them, because they're going to have to trade their old religion in for something new. Judaism even, even Shia Islam, they're not going to accept, a Mahdi that's rewriting a book to the tune of like what Herod would have done, or like a foreigner would do. And so Buddhism, Theravadian Buddhism doesn't believe in any future Buddhas. And the ones who do believe in like the Dalai Lama or whatever, they're not going to believe in some maitreya that's like extremely worldly. And you know what I mean? Just a facade of spiritualness. And so while, the two witnesses and the trumpets and that resistance links up with the Mahdi and all the traditional ones. And then by Revelation 15, it's all worked out and what I've written down to where, that it sinks in their eschatology, at least for Islam. And so then you have the AI, the statue that speaks. It's like a kiosk kind of, you know what I mean? Like a government kiosk. And it's a reprogrammed AI that triages people. I don't know. I don't want to get into it. But the thing to remember is you have the 6 seals. And at the 5th seal, the 2 witnesses come up. At the 5th trumpet, the angels come. At the 7th trumpet is the equivalent of the rapture. And then after that, the bowls of wrath are poured out. And there's a fight in Armageddon, Revelation 19. Jesus wins. Armageddon, the army stretch all the way to Damascus. And so, that's how it sinks with Islam. I'll get into that one later. But so then after that, the second advent comes, people are changed into Isaiah 65:20, or they're reincarnated, or they're resurrected. The first fruits of the resurrection, the second death has no power over them. All those who die go into heaven, the same, that which is, if you die and you're not martyred, heaven has to come from somewhere after the final rebellion. And that's New Jerusalem. And so, after the rebellion is New Jerusalem, and that's the end of the story. All right, peace.